I'm Caleb Silver,
Laura Sams,
Kobe Willett,
Katie Thompson, William Mosier,
Lucas Homerson,
Nathan Ralston, and this is my story.
My story.
My story.
This is my story.
My story.
My story.
and this is my story. I'm Caleb Silver, and this is my story. I grew up in a Christian home where my faith was never forced upon me. I grew up going to First Presbyterian Church in Conrad, where I rarely missed a service. I feel like my parents really gave me that choice that allowed me to develop into who I am today. Around my sophomore year of high school was when I really began to grow. At the end of my sophomore year, I read a book called Shaken by Tim Tebow. And after reading this book, I felt inspired to really grow and do more. Following this, I went ahead and made an Instagram account where I posted scripture and only grew from there. I really use social media as a platform to put my light on a stand and share my faith with others. To this day, my account reaches thousands of people all around the world. You can find this account on Instagram and Facebook under the name Spread His Word Daily. Many people know me as a runner, but that's not where my story ends. Through running, I really experienced God's presence, and I've used my gift as a platform to glorify God. I look at running as an opportunity, a gift I've been given, and what I've done with this gift is my gift back to God. Next year I plan to attend Central College, where I will pursue ministry and continue to run.
I'm Clara Sams, and this is my story. I've grown up in a house where every Sunday I was expected to get up and go to church, and every Wednesday night I'd go to youth group. No questions asked. That's just how it was for my family. My siblings had really grown in their faith as they got older, and my parents both took lead roles in the church in some aspect, but it just felt like a routine to me every week. I was baptized when I was 9, but the sermons were still hard for me to sit through, and the Bible was hard for me to understand. On January 1st, 2017, I was sitting in church eating lunch after we had finished our sermon when I was given the news that one of my closest friends had passed away the night before in a car accident. I was instantly mad at God. I didn't understand why he had taken somebody who had so much potential in his future. I stopped praying, I didn't pay as much attention during church, and my anger towards God didn't go away anytime soon. My siblings were both rocks for me through this entire time. I was in a dark place and couldn't seem to find the light at the end of the tunnel. I kept pushing people away, and my outlook on life was really poor. Both my brother and my sister were constant in telling me that God had a plan, and that even though I may not understand it, there was a purpose for the pain. Over the last 2 years, I have grown a lot in my faith and came to the realization that everything really does happen for a reason.
I'm Kobe Willett, and this is my story. I was born into a Christian home like many people from around here, so I've always known what faith is, but just because I know what faith is doesn't mean I haven't had struggles with my own walk. It's easy to slip up here and there, especially when things don't go your way. The goal is just to maintain a firm relationship. As a kid, I didn't really understand a whole lot about what happened at church, so all I did was just go and hang out with my buddies. As I got older, I started going to youth group, and we went to this really cool organization called Fields of Faith. What Fields of Faith is Iowa State University college athletes come to Gilbert High School and talk to all the different high schools that come there about their faith. This is when I would say I got to my strongest point in my faith. People had amazing testimonies that really inspired me to become more serious with my relationship with Christ. This coming summer, I'm excited to say I'm going on a mission trip with my youth group from here in Conrad, which I have a goal to become just a better Christian and spread His word.
My name is Leah Mosier, and this is my story. My family and I have always made a point to make it to church. Every Sunday, we'd travel to Marshalltown, sit in the pews, and hear God's word. It wasn't until this past spring that I was truly tested in my faith. I ran for state FFA office this past spring, and through that, I got to see how God works through teenagers. I went through the interviews and made it to state convention. That Monday morning, we heard the election results, and fortunately enough, I had made ballot. We went back down under Hilton and waited until it was our turn to give speeches. When it was my turn, I went out on stage, gave a 2-minute speech to a body of over 100 delegates, and then waited some more. That next Tuesday afternoon, in 4th general session, they announced the new 2019-2020 Iowa FFA State Officer Team. My name wasn't called. At that point in time, I was frustrated. I was mad. I picked apart every single part of my interview, trying to figure out what went wrong. That next morning, I woke back up from a tear-ridden night and knew that my life had changed for the next year. I wasn't going to be sitting in those seats. I wasn't going to be the officer traveling the state. But I know God has a plan for me. Until the next day that I received a text from a friend, and it was a Bible verse about how God has a plan for us. Now that I'm leading a life and about to graduate high school, I know that God's plan is not always what we see for us. It's not always what we want to hear. It's not what we always want to see. But He still has that plan that's going to make us who we are today. I learned through this experience that I need to put more faith in God. I need to put more faith in what He has for me and what that plan is.
I'm Lucas Howerson, and this is my story. I grew up in a Christian household. We go to a very traditional church. It was always kind of part of my life, but I didn't really take stuff seriously until about late middle school age. Taking confirmation helped me grow and helped me study the ways of our church. But even then, it wasn't really, I didn't really put it to use until events in my life, the loss of friends, the loss of family, events at school, different things happening in my life that I needed somebody to turn to, and somebody that was always there was God. Knowing that He was there was something that got me through those tough times. Just remember, the one person that's always there, God.
I'm Katie Thompson, and this is my story. Moving to BCLUW helped grow my faith. I moved here in 5th grade. All my friends believed, and I was always being invited to youth group, and I would turn them down. When I lived in Marshalltown, no one really talked about faith, and no one in my family believes. So going to youth group was a really big step for me, and I didn't know how my dad would take it. I was on the bus one day after school, and a close friend of mine, who had been trying to convince me to go to youth group, came up to me and said, "You should come to youth group tonight." And I don't remember if I fought or if I just easily agreed, but I went to youth group that night, and I remember walking into the building, and everyone was so nice and welcoming. After that, I was hooked. I was still very skeptical and was still questioning a lot. I knew very little about God, and I felt very behind for the longest time. The hardest part for me was having my dad accept that I was going to youth group. I was such a daddy's girl, and I always did everything he liked. I wanted to be just like my dad. So this was a really big step in my life, and at the end of my 6th grade year, my dad and his longtime girlfriend split up, resulting in them taking everything, and that's when a lot of my classmates stepped in and helped me out by giving me clothes they didn't wear anymore. That really opened my eyes to the community I was now living in and how God works. The help never stopped either. They were always helping me out when I needed it most. I never once asked for help. It was just always given at the right time, and it was obviously God's work. I started going to church almost every Sunday, my freshman and sophomore year. I started gaining more knowledge and asking more questions in youth group. Freshman and sophomore year, my dad still hadn't really accepted that I was going to church and youth group, which was really hard for me because my whole life I'd been super close to my dad. Around my junior year, my dad started accepting that I believed, and he would ask me how was youth group, what'd you talk about, stuff like that. It was such a relief because I knew he was finally coming to terms with the fact that I went out on a branch by myself without him, and I was doing okay. I had prayed and prayed that my dad would accept that I believed and that he'd be okay with that. Once my dad accepted my faith, I felt like I could give 100% of myself to God, and I started developing a relationship with God. I would find myself talking to him while driving or just playing basketball in my driveway. The older I got, the more confident I'm becoming in my faith, and the more I'll bring him into a normal, everyday conversation. If I hadn't moved to BCLUW and didn't have my friends constantly asking me to go to youth group, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have a relationship with God. My advice to people about believing is even if you don't have a person in your family supporting your faith, don't give up. It can be really hard sometimes, but just know that God is with you all the time, and He has a plan, and we just have to trust Him.
I'm Nathan Ralston, and this is my story. When I was young, I didn't know who God was. It was only when I was adopted into a Christian home that I discovered who He was and what He did for me. Ever since then, I have always gone to church and youth group. I grew up with God in my life, and even still, I am growing in faith. Everything I have accomplished, I have done with the Lord by my side, through sports, school, and community activities. I have been given the opportunity to share my faith with others and glorify God. I am thankful God has placed me in a community full of people who have helped me grow in my faith. This summer, I am happy to say that I will be going on a mission trip with my youth group to spread His name.
Over the last 2 years, I have grown a lot in my faith and came to the realization that everything really does happen for a reason.
Realize that you have a soul, so be careful with it. What you do in your life has greater effect than what you can see on the surface. So.
All for His glory.
Grow in His name.
Grow in His name.
Grow in His name. Grow in His name.
Grow in His name.
Grow in His name.
Go
in His name.